Welcome to The Culture. We rest at the pulse of the community, providing all things news, music, fashion, events, and everything that we talk about in between. It's a lifestyle. We are The Culture. Hi, I'm your host, Jessica Modkins. Welcome to The Culture, and we're continuing to celebrate Black History Month. As I explained to you last week, in 2012, I had the opportunity to begin doing research on my neighborhood, which I grew up, Richmond Heights, from the urging of my mom. And ultimately, we wrote this book called Images of America, Miami's Richmond Heights. And in doing so, we had the blessing, the opportunity to sit with over 100 pioneers of Richmond Heights. And we were able to get many of those interviews on camera. And so last week, we were able to view some of those interviews. We discovered the rationale behind why Captain Frank C. Martin decided to build this South Dade community. And this week, let's explore the reasons why the streets in the community are curved, how all of the churches started. So join me as we continue with the documentary, Richmond Heights 49ers.
(1854), Brown versus the Board of Education declared segregated schools were unconstitutional. But this ruling took quite a few years before affecting the Florida school system. It wasn't until the 1960s before the Board of Public Instruction of Dade County put together a council to desegregate the schools. This also led to the transfer of black teachers to predominantly white schools. As the community was envisioned, Frank C. Martin set aside a few acres to build places of worship. The first churches to be built was Bethel Missionary Baptist Church and Mount Pleasant African Methodist Episcopal Church in 1951, respectively. The churches began in resident homes and later moved to the community center that sat on the dead-end street of Pinkston Drive. They shared this community center for some time until their own facility was built. For the first Sunday of each month and the third Sunday of each month, the center on Pinkston Drive was dedicated for Mount Pleasant AME Church to worship. On the second Sunday of each month and the fourth Sunday of each month, the center was dedicated to Bethel Missionary Baptist Church to worship. Other churches sprouted as the community grew and interest rose. Second Baptist Church, Macedonia Church of God in Christ, and Glendale Missionary Baptist Church. Some of these churches began in residence homes, the Richmond Heights sales office, the water tower, Richmond Heights Park, or at Frank C. Martin Elementary School.
Bethel Missionary Baptist Church was organized in May 4th, 1951. It was originally organized in the home of the Sanders. Matter of fact, one of our elders in our church, Elder Donald Sanders, his parents, the first services were held, and the organizational services were held in that church. There was L.L. Ross, and there was Pastor C.J. Walker, there was Pastor Deerwood Hunter, and then I came in 1990.
I came to this church in about 16 years ago, in the year 2000 is when I came here. I was recruited, if I can say that, by Reverend Dr. John A. Ferguson, the founding pastor at that time. Reverend Ferguson was a great man and had a heart for ministry in the church. Reverend Ferguson was a kingmaker. He was behind the scenes, and his specialty was administration and empowerment. And so therefore, He empowered politicians. He empowered African American in particular, and they end up having careers, especially in education. And he was an advocate for that. He founded this church with a handful of people and in a living room. And he broke off from another ministry here in Richmond Heights, and they came up with the name of Second Baptist Church, and they met in their home for a while until they acquired a water tower property here on campus. And they had church in a water tower pump room when they worshiped until God opened the door for what we call the old sanctuary.
Reverend Ferguson was instrumental in the community, in terms of he was working with the water board. He was an activist in the community, and he had the idea of trying to get a church started in the community, would have more, be more community minded. When he approached me and several others of us about the possibility of beginning one, then I was receptive to to that idea, and I joined him in his endeavor to try to bring the church to the community. And they went to the school board, they went to the county, they went anywhere to to speak or to address an issue. They were heard. In fact, that's how we managed to get the land here for this church. Mr. Redding was very good friends with Dante Fasel, and I think this much of this land up here was owned by I think Hendricks, Fasel, and that about three attorneys that owned much of the land up in this area, and we were able to purchase all of this acreage that the church is on, plus the buildings, the original building. All of that was done through the efforts of, Mr. Reddy was very instrumental in that. Deacon Bimbo, Deacon Bimbo was the named the church. In fact, we were trying to decide on what to name it. He suggested Second Baptist, since it would have been the Second Baptist Church in the community.
Glendale Missionary Baptist Church began in April of 1963 under the leadership of Dr. Harrington. Dr. Harrington lived on Lincoln Boulevard, and that's where the church began. They came up with a theme called Pulling the People Up. And with that and the name Glendale that Pastor Harrington had found to be a nice name from another church adopted that name, and they then organized in April of 1963. They had a couple of meeting places. One was the old post office, which was here in Richmond Heights as well, and it was small, so they grew to maybe 20 adults and maybe 5 or 6 kids. So they moved from there to Frank C. Martin, which was the next location. In 1963 was Pastor Harrington. Then in 1965, there was Reverend Turner. Reverend Turner spent 2 years, 1967. Then came Pastor Joseph Coates, who was there for 30 years. Under his leadership, the church moved and marched from Frank C. Martin in 1971 over to its present site where it exists now. They found the land in 1967. Some of the members got together, about 3.5 acres. There was nothing over here but wooded areas and the graveyard that is just down the street. Back in 68 and 69, we didn't really have a large building place. And then, of course, you had to use the school whenever it was available and to keep the cost down, because now we're talking about going into a building program. Well, Pastor Coates would take his station wagon and run around the neighborhood and pick up all the kids, and he would bring us back to our home. And there we would have youth group meetings, Bible studies, and so forth. Some of us were in the garage, some of us were in the lawn, some were in the family room. And so that's how it grew into what would really be a church where the family was still the family.
Martin Memorial was sort of like a new church at the time, and it was one single building, and later on we had a different part, and the single building became like the entertainment, you know, where you would go by, and Sunday schools and things like that.
It's time! North Miami Mayor Alex Jesume and the city of North Miami invites you to the 2025 Nomi Music Fest, Saturday, February 22nd at Cackney Park, North Miami, with Grammy Award-winning recording artist Anthony Hamilton. Joining him will be the songstress Miss Chalet, the Levert Experience, R&B soul singer Cole Thomas, the legendary Chuck Rock, and more. Well, coming back, this will be our biggest year yet. Grab your tickets now. The Nomi Music Fest, Saturday, February 22nd, from 6 to 11 p.m. at Cackney Park, North Miami. For tickets, search Anthony Hamilton Nomi on eventbrite.com to get your tickets now. They're going fast. Saturday, February 22nd at Cackney Park from 6 to 11 p.m. North Miami.
In the 50s, during the time of segregation in Miami, blacks had a nice assortment of social outings to choose from. Their social life was full of theater, live entertainment, and dancing. Many would go to Coconut Grove. The action took place on Grand Avenue. It was the home of restaurants, nightclubs, and theaters for entertainment. Blacks would go to the Tiki Bar, the Ponciana, Gill Spot, and the Ace Theater. Colored Town was Miami's little Harlem. It was full of thriving black businesses that people took pride in patronizing. In Colored Town, people would frequent the Strip. This area was home to the Night Beat at Sir John Hotel, the Island Club at the Harlem Square Gardens Hotel, the Fiesta at the Mary Elizabeth Hotel, the Elks Club, and the Nut Club.
Colored Town in the 1920s, 30s, 40s was really a cultural center for black people all over the South and even beyond the South. People came here for entertainment, for the nightclubs, of course for the weather. So some accommodations had to be made for black tourists and black performers who were coming into the community. So you had segregated hotels and accommodations for them in the black community. But anything that you could get in Harlem in the 1940s and 50s, you could get in Overtown, or Colored Town. There were, the stores were so close together along 2nd Avenue, you couldn't walk between the buildings. I mean, you had 5 or 6 movie theaters, restaurants, clothing stores, all kinds of fabulous offerings in terms of business opportunities and access in Colored Town because of segregation, because people could not go outside of that area to really spend their money. So you had a very healthy, productive black business community during segregation. If you were a performer, a black performer, up and coming, particularly if you came out of the South, you had to come to Miami to perform, to have your reputation really be solid. So it doesn't surprise me that if you track back the careers of many popular black singers back in the 50s and 40s and 30s, they had their start in Miami, or at least a big part of their career was developed performing in Miami.
We played Fontainebleau, the Venus Rock, Miami Beach, the Virginia Man Club. We played in most of the highly rated places in Miami Beach. We were well known. And please, I'm not making a brag of it, but I was well known for my skill. Yes. And I did play well and kept things up in Billy's Rose, man. I played with certain people like Harold Hill.
The Miami Local 322 of the National Alliance of Postal Employees hosted the annual Postman's Ball. Community residents look forward to this event.
It was very popular during that time for Most fraternities and organizations of the sort had a yearly affair.
At that time, you had Bayfront Park Auditorium down on Biscayne Boulevard where Bayside is now. And that's where we used to have that ball. And it was kind of on, you see, we dressed up for it and everything. I think the highest ticket we ever had was $20. But some people paid at the door that didn't send us. You could have sent it in to, or given it to someone who gave you the invitation, you know. But it was an invitational ball to start with. And that's the way they were doing it. Luckily, we were blessed to get through it. We had a full band. Like the band people that were working around in Miami, we had one of them at any given time.
But every year, we had our annual dance.
There were other local social events and dances as well.
In Richmond Heights, everything happened with our social events up at the youth center. And Pat had a beautiful Sweet 16 birthday party, and everybody came. We had a fantastic time. We danced. Anytime music came on, we danced. That was just one of those things we did back then. Everybody was dressy all the time. I mean, we dressed up, the guys had on their suits, and we had on our wide dresses. We looked like television.
We had a men's club up there, yes, which served us very, very well. I had my oldest daughter became 16. I had a Sweet 16 party down there. And come prom time, I got one senior and one junior at prom time. So I took the whole club and had them after the prom come to the club.
Yes. And other mothers came in with us.
And only one other person came in to help, and that person had a son. Yes. But we had them dance all night, yes, have breakfast, eggs, whole breakfast.
Yes.
And of course, the ones that weren't involved, the same way I did at my house with my children have parties. If one of my children says, yes, he's a part of us, you come in. And Gwen would say, we know him, Daddy, but he don't belong to us. So they couldn't come in. But those are days that made Richmond Heights really, really memorable. Conditions like that when we together fought for things that we needed.
Because, after the prom, you didn't want to go home. Even though the prom was at Mays, you didn't go to the hotel. You decorated that auditorium with auditorium, and the cafeteria was all one. And you decorated that real nice. Prom over by 12. So now, you don't want to go home. You got on your pretty dress and you got on your tuxedo. So that's why the parents would get together and use that place down there. And they enjoyed it. Danced to make sure you were going to be out until the sunrise. Now, that's why because you got to talk about it the next day.
They used to have dances and everything in a tent out here on Lincoln Boulevard. Butterball would be out here and all like that. The people over town would hear that this is Richmond Heights, and they would come out here to, have dances. And we used to have dances in the old post office. And all the children would gather, have parties, and they would enjoy themselves, and you wouldn't have any crime and nothing around. So, and you could trust the kids then. You could trust them because you knew where they were coming from. You knew their parents and all that. And everybody was welcome to everybody's house. If I had cooked some food and your kids wanted something, they would come there and eat.
Many black professionals and black businesses found home in Richmond Heights. There were grocery stores, barber shops, drugstores, doctor's offices, dentist offices, diners, convenience stores, and gas stations. In Miami-Dade County, the first black letter carrier was John Fryer, and the first black postmaster was Anthony Palmore. Both resided in Richmond Heights. Captain Martin envisioned a shopping center for entrepreneurs so that once money got into the community, it stayed in the community.
And in reality there it was to be developed into a community that was one whole community. There was a business area in there. There were the homes. There was also plots laid out for apartments later on. And the thought there in his mind was that either the business would be owned by the resident, or else if it were a large area, the managers would be from the community. His intent was once money came into the community that it would stay in the community.
Limited resources to start a practice, so it was not easy getting started. As a matter of fact, initially I practiced in the office of a physician who had an office in Richmond Heights already. That was Irwin Potash. So I worked in his office a few months until I was able to open my own office on Lincoln Boulevard in the shopping center there. And I did a general practice there for 6 years. And I had an office there on Lincoln Boulevard next door to the dentist, Dr. Langston Cryer. So it was a viable little shopping center there. And I was there for a few years, and then Dr. Cryer and I bought a building, an old club building on Carver Drive. And we had it renovated, divided down the middle, and he was in one half and I was in the other half. And our office was there until 1970, when I decided to go into emergency medicine.
Originally, when the 10 members of the community came together to purchase the shopping center, we had to become incorporated. So the name of the corporation was Richmond Enterprises Incorporated. There were 10 original members in that, and everyone was offered an opportunity to buy shares in the corporation, and everyone got a certificate. This represents 100 shares at $10 each. So everyone originally put in $1,000 to get the corporation off the ground and to begin the purchase. And basically, originally when we purchased the center, there were, the 7-Eleven was in there. There was a laundromat in there. I think Dr. Cryer's dentist office was in there. I think Dr. Green had a medical office in there. And I believe Olivia had the drugstore in that original building, and I think that was a men's club in there. But those were the businesses that were up and operating when we purchased the building.
The drugstore was a place for everybody to go and sort of hang out sometime and find out what was going on, and everybody enjoyed Miss Edwards so much. The men would go to the barber shop in the back and they'd hang out back there, and it was like just a place for hanging out.
And when I look back on it, is that even though we were segregated, we were almost like isolated, but almost like in a safe place, because we had our own gas station. I said we had 2 gas stations. We had a drugstore. We had a dentist's office, Dr. Cryer, and we had Dr. Green was the physician, family physician. And I can remember even one time Dr. Hollis tried to start he did have like a restaurant that was like a barbecue place. Dry cleaners. We used to have like a little place we call it the sweet shop, because we used to go and play the jukebox. and get hamburgers and hot dogs and sodas. There wasn't sodas. You know what it was? Those snow cones and things like that.
I used to love to go up there. And at a particular time, they had 2 gas stations up there. And 7-Eleven was up there. And Emmett Wright and them had a fish market up there.
It was kind of hard for me working in the daytime, teach at school, and have to come home in the afternoon and work at the fish markets at about 11, a quarter to 12 at night. That was in 1958, 59. I sold fish, conch salad, fritters, some everything to do with fish. I know conch was cheap. It was about 79 cents a pound. But my wife buy conch every week, but she loved conch fritters and conch salad and everything to do with conch. Now we had the group of, we used to buy fish from it, I think we call it the port over town. We go over there and we buy the fish early in the morning before anybody get up, because we was over there around 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning buying fish so I could come back home and get ready to go to work. So that was a strain on me too. So we cut that out, and sometimes we even went to Key West to get the fish, because it was cheaper down there. My wife and her cousin had people in Key West, and we used to go down there and bring fish back to the fish market.
When you look at communities today, you want to make sure that you have schools and retail and housing and parks and all those things that lead to a good quality of life in a community. You want to plan those things as a part of laying out that neighborhood. And that's what he did back during a time when planned communities weren't the kinds of things that were really thought about. And, you know, if you go back and you take a look at the original plans, you can see how well thought out the community was. And not only did he just plan it, but he built it based upon those particular plans. And, you know, Richmond Heights, again, in my mind, you know, probably became a model for other communities that were built later on. But again, it was something that was kind of unheard of during his time.
Richmond Heights was built on the backs of World War II veterans, so it's only befitting that the first organizations established were the American Legion Richmond Heights Post 281 and the Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 8197. Their mission was to promote assistance to veterans. Organizations are the collection of like minds for a common desired purpose and goal. The residents of Richmond Heights knew this, and as the community was being built, so were organizations. There were civic, religious, political, youth, and fraternal organizations that outfitted this area.
Mrs. Gray, she was the founder of the Richmond Heights Women's Club. And I was one among the first persons. She rolled up by me and talked to me about it. In '54, I joined Richmond Heights Women's Club. Pretty Hat Teas, I started that. It was, we had a program and gave prizes to the prettiest hat. And it worked out, I thought it worked out real good with me, because I was the chairperson and I knew what I wanted to do and how I wanted it. It made more money than anything we've ever had, anything, because I was always the one to raise the most money. So And I had my way to ask you if you would buy a ticket for this affair. And if you gave me an excuse, I would listen to your excuse, and then I would say to you, well, I'm sorry about that, or I'm sorry, maybe you can't come, but would you please give me a donation? That's how I made my money.
We had a meeting out here that I was the secretary and Mr. Redding was the president. That was before they had the association thing out here.
We started the Homeowners Association when there was a school that was going to be built out here under the guise of, and we said, de facto segregation. And that school was going to be built right beside what is now Richmond Middle School. And we didn't want to see another segregated school. So along with several other activists, would-be activists, Mrs. Vivian Green, wife of Dr. Herbert Green, who lived out here, and Mrs. Elizabeth Collins, who was a math teacher at Richmond Heights. I was a special ed teacher in Richmond Heights. And we said, no, we're not going to do that. And we went to the school board and appealed at a meeting not to build another segregated school. Those were the years when everybody was pushing for integration because we recognized separate but equal was inherently unequal. And they said, no, we're going to build this school anyway. And we said, no, you're not. So the day that all of the equipment was pulled up beside Richmond Middle School, the equipment is coming to dig for the foundation. And we thought, how can we stop this? And we activated ourselves around in the community and stood on the ground so no dirt could be digged.
They was wanting to build a school and then some people didn't want it. But I was laying down in front of the bulldozer and it was getting too close to me. I wanted to jump up and run. But I sit there, I'm laid there, you know. And it was very scary to me because that bulldozer was too big to run over me. And I remember Sister Marshall, she the one who first talked to me about it. I remember it well, those people digging up and them bulldozers and stuff running out there and we landed in front of it. And I come home, I say, you know, I'm crazy. But I'm really glad now that I did that because I think that it made this a better place for us to live in. That our decision, they agreed with us. But then later on, they got to school anyway, though.
They tried to build another elementary school in Richmond Heights, and the community would not permit it. They wanted it to be right next to Richmond Heights Junior High School. The community members, activists, said no. They did not want another segregated school. And so they, when the bulldozer came down the street, they stretched out and they marched and they kept them from building that elementary school.
Although many residents of the Heights have migrated across the world, they have taken with them that same spirit of resilience and pride that the community was founded on. It still lives on today. The Richmond Heights 49ers.
Thanks so much for joining us. It was such a good time, right? You learned a lot. I'm sure it was my pleasure to bring those jewels to you. And tonight, come on back for my 2 cents. Plus, it's my birthday. So join us, grab a drink, cock your feet up, and have a good time with us as we chatted up about Super Bowl, the halftime show, and all of this week's shenanigans right here live on My 2 Cents tonight. I'll see you then.
The Culture is produced and owned by the Culture Media Group and cannot be reproduced or broadcast without written consent.